Welcome to Health+Tech, the show where we explore the law that applies at the intersection of healthcare and technology. Your hosts, Janice Suchyta, Andrea Lina, and Jonathan Ishii, are healthcare attorneys and partners at McGuireWoods LLP, a law firm of 1,100 attorneys with offices throughout the United States and the world.
Welcome, everyone. This is Health+Tech, the podcast that explores technology trends and innovations in healthcare. On this episode, we will talk about new innovations in biotechnology and the effect on medical treatments and personalized medicine. I am your host, Janice Suchyta. I'm a partner in health law at McGuireWoods, and my practice focuses on health law, and I am one of the team leads for the McGuireWoods Digital Health team. And I'm so excited today that my guest is Donna Chang. She is the CEO and founder of Hope Biosciences. Hope Biosciences is a biotechnology firm located in Sugar Land, Texas, which is a suburb and part of the greater Houston area here in Texas. So Donna, I'm going to kick it off and I'm going to ask you to please kind of tell everyone your background and then kind of go into Hope Biosciences, all the amazing things that you're doing there. And then we'll talk about your stem cell therapies and kind of describe that so that everyone can understand all the great things that are happening in Sugar Land.
Well, thank you for the introduction and thank you for your invitation to be a part of this podcast. This is so exciting to talk about what we do. My name is Donna Chang. I am the founder and CEO of Hope Biosciences, as well as the president of the Hope Biosciences Stem Cell Research Foundation. And I'll try and talk a little bit about both entities soon. I am a stem cell fanatic. I've always been interested from the actual biology of cells. I was a biology major in undergrad. I did my graduate work in biotechnology, but always looking at what regenerative medicine would mean and what the effect of stem cells could mean on modern medicine was always very intriguing, very exciting for me. I would have spent my career in the lab, but I enjoy people and I enjoy the interactions. And so I found myself sort of in the business end of things and right now trying to build a biotechnology or biopharmaceutical company, really leading and paving the way on sort of standardizing what cell therapy is going to be and what it's going to look like 20, 30 years from now, kind of thinking about what that, what the long-term plan is going to be. So that's just a little bit about me. Our company focuses on primarily autologous stem cells. And so just a quick overview on what we do. Our bodies contain stem cells. Clearly, there is some self-healing abilities our bodies have. And it's really discovering, well, what is that? What causes a cut to heal? What causes, lungs to be able to regenerate after years of smoking? Like there's clearly regenerative things that are going on in our bodies. Now, Janice, you know a lot about all of the regulatory law in the United States. The way it is whether the stem cells are coming from your own body or not, the fact is, in order to make them usable, there is some level of processing that has to take place, right? Someone has to take the cells out of your body and make them useful in some way. The challenge so far has always been that in cell therapy, we've never been able to sort of make enough of them and be able to repeat treatment in a way where we see long-term efficacy. That's sort of the major issue with cell therapies. Like we hear a lot anecdotally about how awesome they are in sports injuries. You probably hear a lot about that, or, the doctors down the street giving stem cells and people feeling instantaneously better. Like you hear about these stories, but there's no real clinical evidence that has been done through, standardized clinical trials. And that's really the reason why we don't have approved products in the United States yet using stem cells. And so we're trying to change that by really going backwards and thinking about not so much the diseases, but first trying to establish and answer the questions, why aren't therapies available? Like what are the downfalls? Why are we not, as an industry, like being able to fix the problems and get a good standardized therapy out there? So that's what we focus on. And I think I'm confident to say that we've figured it out for the most part. And now the fun stuff of being able to use the cells and seeing how it works in different diseases is sort of where we are right now. And it's really exciting. Yeah.
It is exciting. Well, and I think you have a very unique model, and I think our listeners would be really intrigued as to the model that you have set up, because you have Hope Biosciences on one side,
yeah,
and then you have your nonprofit foundation on the other side.
Yeah.
Can you explain why you have that division and what each side of Hope Biosciences does?
So originally, Hope Biosciences was 5 years ago. I started as just Hope Biosciences. It was a company. We were focused on really perfecting the manufacturing process. So if you look at it as a drug company, like we're making the drug, right? That's what the company does. But we quickly found out that we, had gathered enough data to warrant our first human clinical trial. And it happened within the first year. So what I thought was going to take 5 to 8 years, we got done in a year. And so that's why we all of a sudden were put into the world of clinical trials. And as someone who has been on the, drug development side, the actual clinical side of it was something I never had any experience doing. So we had to learn. We had to learn from scratch, and we ended up building a team that would be able to figure this out. And in cell therapy, there are not a lot of great CROs, like contract research organizations, that have a lot of experience with cell therapies yet. And seeing that there haven't been any success yet, no one's actually been successfully able to do it. So we really needed to innovate in this area. And so I think that's where we, not only did we innovate in the lab, but we also innovated on the clinical end of things. And so the reason why we split off and put the clinical end on a nonprofit foundation side was because a lot of times research is driven by the for-profit entities, right? We're the ones that are saying, well, these indications make this amount, this is the market size, this is what we're going to study. And so I thought it would be really refreshing to have a different entity with different board members, kind of regulating, like, what are the needs? What are the needs of the community? What are unmet needs? What are things that we should be studying that no one is, spending the time or investment money to study? And so that's why we started this foundation, nonprofit foundation, where they could take a lot of risk, right? They could study lots of different diseases, invest in things like expanded access. Expanded access is one of FDA's programs to allow people, it's called the compassionate use program, where patients that are very sick and, or have terminal conditions can actually access treatments through that program. But again, in the normal setting, manufacturers don't really participate or don't like to participate because there's just a tremendous amount of work that's involved in getting those kinds of applications done. But there's a lot that can be learned. And so the foundation, again, because they're funded by, the community and generous donors, they are able to study a vast variety of different things. And, one day may be able to lead to commercial success. But I think right now the goal is to get patients access. I think that was one of the primary drivers behind that, get patient access, and also just further that research because we need solutions quicker than they're forming right now. And there are no shortage of conditions, right? So, yeah. But the foundation is great. We're growing it right now. We're in our first year. We just celebrated our first year anniversary, and we're studying 20 different diseases, which is great. And right now they're using cells that have all been developed and manufactured by Hope Biosciences. But this coming year and next year, we hope to have many more manufacturers also involved that are doing cell therapies, because we know a lot of people in the Houston area that are working on innovative products, and the foundation can help those kinds of new technologies get to patients quicker. And so we're really excited to be able to finally share the knowledge that we've learned over time and help our community and our industry kind of move faster.
I liked how you said that you plan on working with other firms and the innovation down here in Texas. I think it's interesting. My law practice, and I'm in the McGuireWoods Houston office. Mm-hmm. But I think it's interesting when I'm working with other biotechnology clients in this space. Traditionally, everyone thinks of biotechnology on the West Coast, Silicon Valley, and then on the East Coast with Boston and that huge academic hub in regards to research and development. Do you see a trend, and is there a particular reason why you chose to have Hope Biosciences in the Houston metropolitan area? And do you think Houston and Texas is going to be a third coast for biotechnology?
Well, I think I'm going to start by saying I'm going to call it. I think Houston is it.
Yep,
Houston is
I do
it.
too.
Texas as a whole is it. I'll tell you why in a second. But let's talk about the major hubs so far. Okay. And a lot of it has to do with where we are as a country, where we are technologically as a whole. Because if you think about the hubs so far, I was in economic development for many years. I started my career in life science economic development for the state of Maryland. And Maryland had a very strong hub, and we had a great hub because why? We are close to the FDA. And that was one of my major selling points, right? Yeah. But now you look back and you say, do you really need to be close to anyone physically, right? Because today with Zoom, you're a phone call away. There's the idea of proximity has sort of shifted. We've completely changed that. And so now it becomes, well, where's the best place to do business, right? Where's the best place? And I can tell you that, in Houston, they would say, well, in Texas, we have a real problem because we don't have a good life science workforce. Well, I can tell you the best life science workforce is right here. Up until now, there have been no companies. So we've lost our workforce to the West and the East. Sure. But now, with all things considered, living, quality of life, everything, I think people are wanting to come back here. And in doing so, more and more companies are being established here. And I think the life science, the energy of the biotech community and the life science community in Texas is thriving, and particularly in Houston. I mean, we are 20 minutes away from the best medical center in the world. There's no reason why innovation shouldn't be happening right next door, right? We have cells we make here, we send directly to the med center, and we just drive them down the street. And that's the way it should be, right? It can be that way. And later on, to be able to get cell therapies in particular to either side of the country. Hey, if Amazon can drop ship anything in a day, you can drop ship stem cells in a day, right? So this location is the perfect central location in the United States, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. I'm not a native Texan. I've been down here 20 years, but yeah, this is a big shout out for Texas, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
I wanted to go back, and I think you said some really interesting ideas. So kind of talk us through, if someone comes to Hope Biosciences, and talk about the business side. You talk about customers being bankers for Hope Biosciences. I think it would be very interesting for our listeners to understand what that involves. And if someone wants to bank their stem cells, how could they do that, and why would they want to do that?
So, banking stem cells is this, first of all, we never started our operation with banking stem cells because there were already people who banked stem cells, right? Well, our objective was to develop medicine using stem cells. Okay. But by definition, in order to make a therapy, we have to use some cell source, whether it's banked or we get it from the person right away. And the reality that we faced really early on was that what people are banking are not really stem cells. People are banking tissues or blood, like cord blood, or whole tissues like fat or bone marrow. But when you take those tissues and you try and find stem cells, for the most part, we're not able to find much in there. And certainly not enough to make any therapeutic difference whatsoever. So then it became pretty evident that there's something wrong. Okay. And we need to, we need to start from the beginning. So we need to manufacture cells in a way where we can repeat therapies in the future, right? That was kind of our starting point. We really needed to figure out, how do we bank people where they're not just banking tissue for a just in case scenario one day, but really put our thinking caps on, like, how is cell therapy? What is it going to look like in the future? And if my kids are one day going to use cells regularly, once a year, twice a year, to hopefully prevent the very diseases that we're worried about today, how are they going to do that without constantly getting bone marrow extracts or fat or whatever taken from their own body to manufacture these cells? And so that's when it became that banking was the key, right? If every single person had a repository of their own cells that are not withdrawn just to use, but are withdrawn to use to grow more, to proliferate more, then we can have this never-ending supply of cells. And so that was the idea. And we developed and patented a way to be able to bank a banking system for every individual that comes in. And so now it's not just reserved for, athletes and the elite. Anybody can bank their stem cells, and they're pure stem cells. They're stem cells that have been created into a master cell bank. So again, anytime cells are needed, some are taken from the tank, but are used to grow more cells so that people can receive fresh therapies. So it's a totally different model because everyone that's in this cell therapy space are giving frozen cells for the most part. And I have a very hard time understanding how we're going to get to a point where we can predict efficacy when we're using a product that is frozen and thawed and given, because we just don't know what the end product that's going into the person is really. Like, you just don't know. It's like kind of like frozen food. Sometimes you thaw it out and tastes great, and sometimes you just can't eat it, right? It's just, there's something about that process where you just don't know. It's the same. So just as a researcher, I just felt that giving fresh cells was the ultimate challenge that we needed to overcome, and we did. And so that is only possible through banking. And so we proudly bank adults, newborns, and from newborns, we can actually find the same stem cells that are in the fat, which are called mesenchymal stem cells. And we're able to create a master cell bank for these children, and they will grow up. And if you just think about, when they're 80 years old, they'll be accessing cells from when they were born. It's really it's just truly exciting. And that, I like to believe that, at the beginning when cord blood banking started, I believe that that's what they thought would happen one day. But the reality is banked cord blood, the usage has been very low. It's like less than 1% of people that have been able to use it for anything. And it's largely because what's in there, right? And so we just have to be banking the right things. And I think we're on the right track, and people are able now to access their cells. And we have shown that in clinical trials, people are able to access cells that are banked and stored and cultured and delivered fresh for use. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. And I'm going to put on my science hat and use a big word. So we're talking about regenerative medicine, right? Okay. So in regards to regenerative medicine, and I'm going to put on my lawyer hat, and like you said, healthcare is the highest regulated industry that we know of. That's why I have a job. And you said in regards to your clinical trials, any type of regenerative and stem cell therapy has to be approved by the FDA, correct?
Yes. Anything that involves live stem cells, yes, would have to be.
So at this point, regenerative medicine, what you're practicing, at this point, you are doing it for a clinical trial and it's waiting to get approved by the FDA.
Right. So it follows the same regulations as any other drug, right?
Sure,
Whether
sure.
you're making Tylenol or whether you're making stem cells, it's pretty much the same clinical trial process. You have to first test for safety, then you have to go to efficacy, and then you have to go to large group efficacy, and then you apply with that data. Hopefully you'll be able to show a significant difference between a placebo and a treatment group. And that's sort of the gold standard on how things are done here in the drug world. And so that they have placed us in the drug category. And that's the process we will have to go through to get approval one day. And approval is important in order for insurance companies to be able to reimburse these treatments, because I don't care how rich you are, there's an extent to how many treatments one can pay for. I mean, there's just, even if patients are paying out of pocket, I get the question all the time, why don't you, like everyone else, go overseas and give these treatments where the regulations are not this way? And it's because it will always be just that then, right? People accessing finite amounts of treatments where we'll never get an answer in terms of efficacy. You know, the trials that we do here, if we show no efficacy, then it tells us that that's not enough. You know, that's the way we interpret it, right? There's a certain amount that the question really becomes, how many cells and how many infusions does it take to get the desired outcome, right? Which are called these endpoints, these primary and secondary endpoints that you're trying to achieve. And that's sort of that's where we are. We're really trying to understand what that is. I'll give you a good example of that. We are treating spinal cord injury. And at the beginning, I thought, how do we even design a clinical trial for spinal cord injury when we don't know how many cells it's going to take to achieve any desired result? And that desired result is going to be different depending on how you design the trial. It could be that a patient feels better, you know, or has less pain. It could be something as low of a threshold as that. But when we're talking about stem cells, everyone wants to know, the question everyone wants to answer is, how long is it going to take for someone to walk again?
Right.
Can stem cells make somebody walk again, right? That's the ultimate question. And that is the ultimate endpoint, right? But how do you design a trial like that when you don't know, when you just don't know what it's going to take? So let's say I designed a trial by giving everybody 10 infusions. I had a group of spinal cord injury patients and I gave 10 infusions to everyone, and they all felt slightly better, but no one's walking yet, right? Then it would be looked at as, oh, well, stem cells may make you feel better, but will never make you be able to walk. That would be the conclusion of it. And it's unfortunate because our science, everything that we develop is dependent upon the results of these sorts of trials, these sorts of standardized trials. But what if the design is flawed from the beginning and you're you're just not set up to succeed? That's our reality here, right? And so I kind of go in my own direction in the sense that it's important that instead of looking at it from doing large clinical trials, we have to learn. We have to learn from doing even individual cases. And I do these individual cases. They're essentially, FDA authorizes these expanded access for single patients or groups of patients. And we do these small cohorts to see what does it really take? And, we have our first quadriplegic actually making his first steps now. And I can tell you that it took almost 30 infusions to get there. But that's what we're learning. So that when I design the next trial, it's going to be 30 infusions, right? That's how you're going to achieve success at the end. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's a learning journey for us and trying to figure out, what is it going to take to be able to propel these things forward while working within the parameters that we have, the regulatory parameters, legal parameters that we have? Sure.
Because I think the historic events that we've all lived through in the last year and a half regarding the immunization and the vaccine for COVID, that turned over in 14 months. But that's not usually the process for FDA approval for a vaccine, correct?
And I want to touch on that because yes, it's not usually the process, but what I've learned, I asked the same question because we started COVID trials at the same time. We were the first stem cell company in the United States to get clearance for a COVID trial. I remember applying for it before the US had even its first death reported, right? So we didn't know anything about the disease, but we applied for it because we felt that it was important to study the effects of these stem cells, to look at the, sort of the immunological effects of these cells. And that's why we went ahead with the trial. But I'm still not finished my trial. So I'm wondering, how did a vaccine start after us and already infused into all these people, injected into all these people, and they already get approval? And they went through what's called the emergency use authorization through FDA. And what I've learned is that program is really for, it's more to preparedness, right? In the case of a pandemic or in the case of like total catastrophe, that's what you're preparing for. That's what emergency use is for.
Right. Public health emergency. Yep.
Public health emergencies. But I wanted to ask, and maybe you all know the answers to this, but isn't Alzheimer's an emergency? I know it's not an emergency that is completely obvious to us right now, but it will be very obvious in the next 20 years if we don't do anything about it. It will be so obvious, economically, socially, everything. It will impact us in so many ways as the baby boomer generation is heading into that. I just feel that the way we as a country look at what emergencies are, what are the unmet needs, that critical needs that we need to solve right away. I think Alzheimer's is way up on that list. And so I hope maybe there are some regulatory people out there listening today that we really spend some time thinking about, we are able to adjust in a pandemic situation like that. We should also adjust for diseases that are not, may not look like a pandemic, but certainly are have incredible impact to our country in many ways.
So, and I think you speak for a lot of healthcare entrepreneurs in regards to, I have this great idea. I have this great treatment. I am practicing regenerative medicine. And you're telling me that healthcare regulatory and the system that you're trying to operate in is hindering you. Do you feel it needs to be, and what you're saying is it needs to be sped up?
I think that America is America, right? You can trust the things that are produced in America largely due to the incredible regulations and all fronts that we have, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Regulation
That's why America is what it is.
Yes.
So in no way do I say, I can appreciate, I definitely can appreciate that the way we've set up the clinical trials, the way we've set up sort of how we do things is the gold standard, the established way of doing things.
Right.
I think that sometimes our regulations are unable to keep up with the innovation, though. If you haven't changed your structure by which you approve drugs, then if a new technology comes along or a new way of being able to test efficacy, for example, I've always wondered, when you get to a certain stage and you test, and we do this as well, we do randomized clinical trials where, half the group gets a placebo, half the group gets a treatment. And you do this in horrible diseases like Parkinson's, it makes you think, like, is this even an ethical way to do this? And why are we doing it this way? Well, we're doing it this way because this is the way it's always supposed to be done.
Right.
But does anyone know that we have pretty powerful computing now, and we can do some pretty amazing statistics. So we have some amazing programs that can handle these kinds of things. Like if I had 1,000 Parkinson's people that all got the same drug and all had the same effect, why couldn't you interpret that data? and effectively be able to show a difference? Is there not a way to do that without having to do these, trials the same way we've always been able to do it? If we can kind of open our minds a little bit, then by demanding sponsors to do large trials without having to do placebo groups, but collect the data in the same way, but give the actual drug to everyone, then at least it gives a shot for everyone to get something potentially promising, right? Because it wouldn't be in clinic, it wouldn't be in large scale clinical trials if it wasn't potentially promising. So I think in this way, we need to open up our minds a little bit and acknowledge that there are other ways to collect data and interpret data that can really help us get to the finish line quicker. Because it's not about us as companies, it's us as a nation and me as a patient and my kids as patients. Like we're the ones that are, we're the ones that are going to suffer because we're not going to have the same kind of options as other people will have, right? Just because we're not able to adjust quick enough. So yeah, I appreciate regulation. I always tell people that regulation is what at least keeps all of us working very hard to try and live up to a standard that, may never be able to be met up. But we try very hard to manufacture the best quality and the best and achieve the best standards in cell medicine. And so I truly believe that, from a regulation standpoint, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. It's just that we need to adjust. We need to be able to adjust quicker.
Yeah. And like you said, maybe in the last year and a half, we have seen that healthcare innovation and regulation can adopt and move quicker and save lives. And that's your Hope Biosciences, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. Well, this has been so fascinating. We could talk for hours and hours about this. I think it's great. I'd love to have you back on another podcast in the near future. Tell us all of your improvements, all the innovation and success stories that you've had at Hope Biosciences. I think it's just great.
Well, thank you, Janice. I appreciate it so much, and thank you again for the invitation. It was fun.
Well, you are so welcome. And I want to thank everyone that's listening today for joining us today on Health+Tech. You can subscribe to our podcast on the McGuireWoods webpage, on our YouTube channel, on Spotify, and on iTunes. Please be sure to tune in the next few weeks. We will have more episodes on all kinds of interesting healthcare technology issues. Thanks again, and thank you again, Donna.
Thank you.